What's going on, everybody? Hit pause here with the first part of this tutorial that I did promise that I would make if you guys gave me 100 views on the preview video, and you did, so here we are. I just want to first start off and show you that this is the terrain that I was actually displaying. This was generated in World Machine, and it's quite actually specific. I'm not going to go through this. If you guys do want to see me create a terrain inside of World Machine, let me know and I'll do a tutorial on that. It's pretty involved, but actually quite a good program. You can actually get pretty accurate in terms of like getting some very specific details that you may want in there. But just to show you, this is the terrain that I generated, so this is the one that I'm going to use. I'm going to go ahead and close that down. Now I have a brand new editor here, which is 4.6, which I think just came out today as the stable release. It was in the library, so as you can see, I've got nothing here except I have brought in some textures. Okay, I don't want to really go through that part. You can see I got cliff textures here with a normal map, and I've got an AO map on them just in case I want to use it. Also, I believe this has an alpha channel, okay, which is a height map. Now, one of the important things about this technique that I do, which is in something that you could skip this, is that I use height maps for each individual texture in order to help blend in between those cracks to try to make a little bit more of a natural transition, because that really just alpha fade transition's not very convincing. But not all of them have a very usable alpha channel, and in some cases, like something like this, really might not work out that well. Grass is arguably one of the hardest materials to deal with when it comes to getting it to look good and tiled out and look kind of realistic in 3D. I am currently exploring some options on that, but like rendering grass, like actually generating grass and rendering a height and normals and slope maps and things like that. So we're going to get started here, and like I said, I do have a height map already generated here. You can see that I also have a flow, deposition, masks, slope, and a wear map that I've brought out of World Machine, but this technique doesn't actually really need them, but they can be used still to enhance your overall material should you want to do that. Okay, a couple notes about the tutorial. I am going to try to keep the parts to about 30 minutes as best as I can, and I think that'll be pretty decent chunks. And as far as what we're going to be doing, a quick rundown is we're going to be creating individual layers as material functions, and then we're going to create basically a master material where we're going to use several blending techniques between those for those functions to get everything to lay out on the terrain automatically for us. Now, I did try to use shadow play to record this already, and while that program shows a better FPS here, like if I move this around, I know it's quite probably pretty choppy coming through Camtasia. But the problem with shadow play is I cannot pause the video, so my dogs start barking or I have to step away or something and I don't want to end the part. I can't do anything about that, which sucks. And the other thing is that it keeps constantly cutting out my audio like 15 minutes into the recording, and just audio glitches out and then goes dead. So I can't use that. Just know that I'll probably keep this up so you guys can tell whether or not that I am lagging. But I am not lagging at all. This is 100% perfectly flawless, fully, like if this was a game I wouldn't be thinking anything of the performance. Okay, so I'm just going to get started, and what I think I'm going to do first is generate the cliff layer. Okay, once I create the one material function, we will be able to go in and just copy it for other stuff. So I'm going to call this material function. Okay, and inside of here we right click, and let's see if I can't make sure I keep this in view, materials, textures, and material function. Now I know that's a little off the screen, so let me move everything up a little bit. Materials, it's not this material here. materials and textures, material function is on this list, and I know that I think that that's right at the edge of the screen here. So what we're going to do is I'm going to call this F, okay, and I'm going to call this cliff layer. Okay, and when we go in here, we are here, so I'm going to go ahead and dock this guy up. And what we immediately get is an output result. Okay, so what we're going to be doing is, first let's just get the textures in. I'll bring them all in. I don't know if I'm going to use that AO layer. Probably not, but there's a chance I may. Okay, so that would be the AO. Here's the diffuse. Here's the normal map. Okay, now the inside of this function is what it's going to be doing is it's going to be making a single layer, and that layer is going to distance blend between for far distance and close distance, and it's also going to be world aligned. So over here, if you type world aligned, there are two that we're going to use here in particular, the world aligned texture and the world aligned normal. So we're going to drag out world aligned texture, and we're going to drag out world aligned normal. Okay, now what this requires is a texture object, but what's really handy in UE4 is that you can just say, hey, convert to a texture object. Convert to a texture object, and we'll do that on each one of these. Now I can officially slap that in like so. Okay, now this is a material function, so what we do not add to a material function are parameters themselves. What you add are inputs, and there is a texture object parameter which can in fact be something that you could have in your material instance, but I tend to make separate functions because part of what I want is in the end material. I want that to be a little bit cleaner. I just want a single node for this whole material. If I expose a bunch of object parameters, then my final material is going to have this huge grouping of stuff that controls the cliff, huge group of stuff that controls the grass, a huge group that controls the dirt. Whereas if I just make separate material functions in each folder, then I just have a single node for cliff, a single node for grass, and a single node for dirt. And then I have I'm going to need a bunch of blending stuff. So that's why I personally opt not to use the texture object parameters. You can use them if you want, but I've found so far that it's a little messier and things just get a little crazy too much after a while. So what we're going to do is this is going to be our large size. Okay, so we want to be able to control that size as we're looking at it on the map with a parameter. So in order to do that, we need a function input, and the function input is going to be a vector 3. Okay, that we just want the RGB because this is going into size, which is looking for a vector 3. Okay, and we're going to call this large size. Okay, and we're going to go ahead and pipe that right there. Okay. Now, there's other things here that we could use, but I'm not really going to use them, like export float 4, which means do you want to use the alpha channel coming out of here? And this is where we come out, okay, the XYZ here. Okay, so if I automatically, now in a material function, the first thing you need is you actually need to make material attributes. Okay, now we can actually plug everything in, and then this comes here. Okay. So once I plug this in, you will automatically see the sphere take on the texture as soon as it figures itself out, I believe. Maybe? Is it doing it? I hope they didn't break this. It almost feels like it's broken. Previewing that, let's preview that. But this should be, previewing this should be fine. Yeah, I feel like that's a little weird. It could be that this guy is not using its preview. So use preview value as default. But that, and I think what's going on is that everything's at 0. Okay, so our default was actually 64. So let me get a better default here. So this is my large size, so I'm going to go with 256. I think that was the problem. I kind of forgot to actually set a default on this guy. And that should, there we go. Okay, so now you can see that this is ruled aligned, so there's a blend between the different, the three planes, okay, the X, Y, and Z planes here. All right, which can and cannot sometimes fall apart at very specific angles. Okay, so that would be our base here. Now this has a height map, so I do want to export the alpha channel here. Okay, so I need a static bool, a Boolean variable here, and I want that to be true. Now I could set it up so that I have a static switch to say, hey, if I don't use it, what do you want to use? In this case, if I don't export it, what I'm going to end up with is just a white image anyway, so I don't really need to worry about that. So what I have now is officially an alpha channel coming out of here, so what I can do is I can throw in a component mask, and I'm going to mask out that alpha channel. And if I preview that, we're going to be doing a lot of previewing. There's actually my height map. It was previewing it, and then it stopped. Okay, so there's that. So I'll stop previewing that, and what we're going to create is an output, function output. Okay, and the output name is going to be height map. And we're going to fire that in. So now when we throw this node into our material, it's going to output for us this height map. But this isn't all we're doing with it yet. We're just getting everything ready. Okay. So this is our large size. This is size 1. We are now going to make a duplicate of that. Okay. And we're going to call this small size. This is going to default to 64. Okay, same texture object, okay, same mask, everything right there is going to be fine, okay. And if I preview this one, it'll be much smaller and much more tiled, so as we get closer, it'll be more detailed, okay. So what we need to do now is we need to blend these together based on distance, and there's a very, very handy function for that here called pixel depth. Now pixel depth basically takes the distance between the camera and the pixels. This is much better to use than subtracting like the object's world position from the camera position, because this is per pixel, which means that, like, say you have like a really long tube and the origin of the tube is at one end of the tube. Well, when you're right up on the end where the origin is, you're very close and your blends will work properly. But if you go all the way to the other end of this, say 500-mile long, oil tube, you're now 5 million units away. You're not blending anymore, but you're still looking at the exact same object. So you could travel your camera across that whole object. Using pixel depth, it will blend just based on the pixels that are visible on your screen, so the blend happens like kind of, I don't know, I guess you call it more locally, as opposed to worrying about where the object's origin is. That's why we use this. Now, these values are kind of like, they end up being really huge, okay? So what we need to do is we need to divide by a distance, but remember, we want to be able to control this. So this is actually going to be a scalar, and this is going to be blend distance. That'll be the input, okay? And we're going to default this to something relatively high. Now, I don't actually know which one of these, when you do it as a, I wish that when this was a scalar that the preview value would stop using a float 4 here, a vector 4, and instead use swap it to a scalar. But so what I tend to do is just throw in my own preview. Okay, and we're going to start at 1,000 units away. Okay, And now what we can do is lerp this, okay, linear interpolate, which is basically a mask, and we're going to say this guy over this guy, okay, and the alpha channel will be this guy here. Okay, now if we preview that, you can see that when I get far away, as I get farther away, you see that change right there? I know that's kind of probably a little too far away, so let's go ahead and change our preview value to say 256 or something, very close. Okay, so there we go. And as we get in, you can see we blend to the higher res. Now you'll notice that we get extremely overly dark, and the reason is because our distance is very high. Our alpha channel is now officially going over 1, so it's very important that we clamp this. And you'll see that fixes that. Okay, so this is the large version. As we come in, we fade in to the smaller version. Okay. Now, this technique is actually flawed, and the reason is because if you have something with like specific details, say that there was like a big grass patch on here or something, as I'm far away, let's see this dark part of the rock goes away. See that? And gets replaced. What I'm doing is I'm replacing the texture, so any physical details that are in the large version actually get wiped out in the lower res version. So what I tend to do is instead, on just the base color here, I think this looks a little better, but you guys can come up with a better technique if you want. What I tend to do is actually lerp this low res guy over 1 here, okay, and then I multiply it in. Okay, so I'm like, you see right there, it's lerping to 1, right, through my distance here. Okay, but as soon as I preview this, okay, now you see that dark patch, but it does, the problem with this is it does get darker. So that's what I was saying, you guys can come up with whatever theory you want, and then if I want to as well, I could say, hey, let me try reversing that, so now it gets darker as I get closer, which I think I prefer. So you can see those details are in there now, but they're gone here. Okay, the height map, I do not want to distance blend, and the reason for that is because if I have, say, sand showing up in the cracks here or something, or dirt in the cracks, if I get closer, that sand will go away and start replacing with sand that's in the very small cracks. That's too much of a visual change, right? That actually changes how everything's done. So I tend not to blend the height map. I use the large size permanently. Okay. Now the normal map, I gonna just replace that too. Okay. You could actually add them together, which it does kind of work sometimes, but you know, if you blend them together properly, it can work. As you get closer, you blend in that smaller normal map. It's kind of like blending in the detail map. But in my case, I tend to just swap them, because I think that it's pretty unnoticeable and I think it looks fine. So I'm going to go ahead and comment this. I'm just going to call this the distance blend. Okay. I'm going to take this guy, and I don't actually need this mask because I'm not going to use that. Okay, I'm going to call this the large size. And I'm going to call this the small size. Now I want to do the same thing with the normal map. Okay, so I have this world align normal here. Go ahead and pull this back a little bit. So I'm going to plug this in. Texture size, this is going to be my large normal map. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull these guys back. Okay. Wait, actually no, that's the blend distance. This is small size. Okay. This is large size. So what I'm going to do is hook the large size up here, because the thing is you can only have one. This is not like a parameter where you can duplicate the parameter out and it will just share that node. Inputs do not work that way. You can pretty much only place one input, even if they're named the same. I don't even think it allows you to use the same name. Must be unique. Okay, so you cannot have more than one of the same input, and it's always going to warn you anytime you use that. Okay, so the same size will control the size here. All right, and I'm going to make the smaller version, and we'll come in here. Okay, so here is my world blended normal map. Again, there's other stuff here. If you want to use world space for a world space normal map, if you have another normal you want to use for the blend, if you care about the world position, maybe you want to offset this, or if you want to use high quality normals or something, you can use these things here, but I'm not going to do that. Now for lerp, I forgot to tell you guys, you hit L there. Okay. Now this actually ends up with an XYZ flat top, which can throw you off from out here. You might think, oh, there's XYZ, and you just start grabbing this. You want to make sure that you grab XYZ texture, okay? And let's see, in what way am I lerping here? I am lerping A, I think, is the smaller one. So let's see if this matches up. Okay, and we use the same blended distance blend alpha channel here, and I want to throw this in normal. Okay, so let's go over here. I feel like I don't have any light. Okay, I think I'm going to add a roughness and metallic here first. Okay, so I don't want this to be metallic at all, and roughness I want to be quite high. Now I'm seeing this is a brand. I've never used this version of the engine before. Okay, there we go. I think I was just previewing over here. That's why I wasn't seeing that. So let's just go ahead and stop previewing that. So my roughness, I want to be, pretty high, but maybe not completely rough here. Depending on how you want to do these. Now these could be inputs too, if you want. But again, the more inputs you add to this function, the more it tends to. Okay, I'm waiting for the preview to show up here. Is preview dead? It can be kind of buggy sometimes. Let me pause and wait for that to come up. Okay, there it is. I had to start previewing this guy. I think if I stop previewing that, it's just telling it, because this is the final output. I guess that makes sense. So I do have an AO here that I don't think I'm really going to bother with. But as you can see now, the normals replace. Okay, as I turn the light, the normals replace, and as I come out here, I'm using the larger size. Now the size, again, is an input, so we can control that, as is the blend distance. So those are our inputs. Basically, we're going to worry about the size. If I want to change the roughness and metallic here, basically I can just come back into the function if I want. If I feel like I'm constantly needing to edit that, I'll swap these to inputs and throw parameters on them. But again, the more parameters you have attached to your final node, the messier things get. Okay, so let's go ahead, and this will be normal, large, normal, small. Here's that ambient occlusion. I'm not going to bother with it. You guys can just, if you're going to use the ambient occlusion, you just want to dupe this guy out here, okay? But I also have outputting my height map, and as you can see, as its own material, this works perfectly fine. I can slap this on an entire terrain, and the whole thing will be rock, okay? So we want to make sure we apply this, and it being a function, once this function is inside of a material and the material is already starting to get set up, that compile times start taking a little bit longer. By a little bit I mean like freaking forever after a while, so just keep that in mind, that it does start slowing down. So as you can see so far, to make each layer, it's not very complicated, right? We're just controlling the size of each blend, okay? I have opted instead to multiply the two textures together so that I don't lose the large details. Say like this gray part of the rock, okay, stays gray, but I just get the higher res stuff in there, okay? You can do that, but depending on the texture, you may not be able to use that. You may just be best just to swap it out. Like for instance, grass, I probably am just going to swap that out, right? I don't want to exactly just I don't want to multiply that together. The grass is going to start getting too dark. I'm going to have to start throwing too many other nodes in there to figure out how to get the colors to work out a little bit better, right? So now the height map is going to be used as basically a splatter map. A lot of people say, you know, they'll call the masks that come out of like World Machine or something, the global masks, that they call that the splatter map, but that I don't consider that the splatter map. For me, a splatter map is the texture that is used to break up the transition area, not the texture that is used to actually control the masking. In our case, the texture that's going to control the masking is going to be a slope mask. So I think I'm going to end the part here with this, and like I said, not very difficult, and I even said that in the preview. This is not like very complicated, but it's going to get a little bit more once we start blending it. Now, the next thing I need to do is basically duplicate this material function and make a layer here. So I have a F cliff layer. I'm going to make an F grass layer. Okay, that'll be what I do in the next video, and it's going to be pretty simple here. So again, we do want to export. Actually, in this case, I don't care about exporting. Okay, I do need that because I am lerping these together, so I can't lerp a float 3 and a float 4. They have to be the same type, so I do need that. But what I could do is actually this instead and just save a node, but really I don't think that that's, hell with it, do that. Okay, so we're using true here, and that option I don't think is here. It's just asking whether or not it's world space. Okay, now if you're curious about what these functions do, just double click it. This, I just want to point out that this right here is virtually identical to what UDK, the way they did it. Okay, you just get the world position, you divide it by some texture size, right? You do the world position keeps it aligned, all right? Then they mask G and B, R and B, and R and G. Those are the 3 different planes, okay? And then they generate the textures off of this. All of this stuff here, this append and switch and stuff like that, is all based on whether or not we're outputting the alpha channel. That's all that this is controlling. And then here, the real magic is we're officially lerping based on the vertex world normal, and we mask the 2 different values. And the only reason that there's not 3 here is because G is the base layer. So, okay. And then they've got a thing for cheap contrast, so you can edit the contrast here. And they use those for the lerps, and then it outputs, okay, these things together. So the XYZ texture just lerps it all three, one right after the other. So okay, and again, to lerp three things together, you only need two lerps, right? Because you got the base, then the lerp, then the lerp. So hopefully this makes sense. And if you want, you can edit this. If you want, you can copy this out and put this in your actual function. And in that case, then you could turn this into like a parameter or something, and have a little bit more, you know, control. And then maybe this out here would be a little bit cleaner. Because like I said, I don't want to do too many function in a function in a function in a function. I don't want to have too many rabbit holes going on in that way. That's why I tend to do it this way. I just prefer. I think that this is clean here. I think it's easy to understand, and it's easy for me to duplicate, keep them in different folders, and then I can drag it in later. So this is part one. This is how I create each individual layer, and in part two, I'll quickly create the next layer and start on the actual masking of the whole thing, and that will actually pretty much cover it. And then after that, it'll just be adding more layers as you see fit. Okay, so thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next part.